But first, we need to talk about how we got to where we are today. And that always begins with, what kind of bike do you ride?
I ride a Surly Crosscheck, and
Of
it
course you
is
do. Steel
equipped
is
for.
real.
That's right. That's right. Equipped to commute in all weather, and it's my trusty steed.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Pedaling Squares Through a Mammal's Life, where we talk about all things bike and endurance sports through a master's athlete's perspective. Viewers and listeners, I'd like to thank and introduce you to Wade Johnson, the executive director of Tri-State Trails, who is a very important figure in Northern Kentucky and Southwestern Ohio's cycling community. We'll get to talk about why he's so important in a few minutes, but first we need to talk about how we got to where we are today. And that always begins with, what kind of bike do you ride?
I ride a Surly Crosscheck, and
Of
it
course you
is
do. Steel
equipped
is
for.
real.
That's right. That's right. Equipped to commute in all weather, and it's my trusty steed.
How long you been on that bike?
I bought it in 13 when I graduated from college as a present to myself after riding an old beater around University of Cincinnati's campus for 5 years. And it was a great investment.
So you're coming up on the 10-year mark on that
That's
bike.
right. That's right.
All original Grupo, or has anything been replaced?
It's got all the original components on it. And I bought it kind of just right off the shelf, except I put on gator skin tires and a Brooks saddle. And
Brooks saddle. Now that's a classic saddle. Leather.
yes, it's finally broken in now. Yeah,
It's only taken a decade.
it's only taken a decade. That's right.
And I have seen you on a cargo bike.
Yes, we have a company vehicle, as we call it, that we inherited from the Davoo cycle program out of Davoo Park when they got rid of some of the bikes that were in their fleet that were not being used as frequently. And we quickly said, yes, we will take the cargo bike.
Like, no problem there. Now,
Yeah.
do you have to check that out, or does that reside in your garage when others are not using it?
Right now, it resides in my garage because we don't have a good place to store it in our office. But for a while, it was down at Union Hall when we were working out of there, and it's a nice visual piece for the office too. It's fully branded, so
Yeah,
it's a great piece of equipment to get people's minds thinking differently about what cycling can be.
I think that you are playing the executive director card as to its present location, but I'll leave that up to you and your staff to work out.
Yeah, right.
So your
I'm the one
bike's,
who has to haul it to the event is the deal because it doesn't have electric assist on it.
as it shouldn't.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't want to offend any of our e-bikers, but it is a more difficult task to ride that cargo bike in northern Kentucky and southwestern Ohio without that e-assist. So it's a more authentic experience.
That's right. You definitely get to feel the hills a lot more drastically in that piece of equipment. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I'll leave it up to your staff as to who gets to use it when, but it seems like it would be a great grocery hauler too.
Yes, it has gone to the grocery store a couple times. That's for sure.
Very cool. So your bike, I have the benefit of knowing you from past bike rides and that sort of thing, and that's kind of, in my experience, the best way to get to know a fellow cyclist is on a bike ride. So I have the benefit of knowing your backstory, but our viewers don't. And I'd like to talk, or at least have you talk a little bit about how your cycling experience informed your career decisions, kind of phase one of that question.
Yeah.
And then phase two is how you got from graduating from the University of Cincinnati to Tri-State Trails, because I know they're intertwined.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fun story. One that I'm proud of. So I grew up out in Batavia, Ohio, in the suburbs, and our neighborhood had some sidewalks, but it was very disconnected from, places that you would go in your everyday life. And until I got to high school, where I went to high school in the city and really experienced a walkable environment. Um, I was sheltered from, what the potential is for cities and for communities that are walkable and bikeable. And I originally enrolled to the University of Cincinnati undecided, thinking that I wanted to do industrial design, and found urban planning along the way, and feel very fortunate that, at age 19, I found something that I really feel passionate about, because I know that that's an elusive journey for a lot of people to find what they want to do that early. But
Four kids, and three of them are applying to college this year, and I get the undecided thing.
yes. Um, but for me, urban planning was a really good fit. I had brought a bike to campus as a way to get around more efficiently, uh, and quickly learned how much uh, cycling can be woven into the fabric of cities through the urban planning program at DAP. And the whole reason I brought a bike was to be able to get across campus quickly.
Mode of
Um,
transportation.
that's right. A 10 or 12 minute walk versus a 3 minute bike ride seems like a no brainer. And so I started focusing some of my studies on cycling infrastructure and cities that have invested in that, and transit. And I moved off of campus in my third year of college, and then it was a mile to get to campus, and it was like a necessity to ride your bike for that. Then I got a co-op downtown, and for me it was a necessity to be able to ride my bike or take the bus downtown, because I didn't want to pay for the extreme cost of parking, And then I got a co-op that was further out from campus, and it was about 4 or 5 miles. And at that point, I was like, I'm hooked on this. This is how I want to get around, to be healthy, to have a low carbon footprint, and it's just fun riding a bike. You get to experience the world in a different way. And so I got a job at a consulting firm out of college, and I was biking to work every day. And
Actually, you had the bug.
that's right.
Once you get the commuter bug, it's hard to shake.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it definitely takes a whole another layer of planning, and um, making your mornings a routine in order to commit to it and keep doing it. But once you have it, it's like, why would I want to do it any other way? Because this is a great way to experience the city. And for me, it's like to fit in a workout,
Yeah.
so that I don't go to the gym, I don't have like a regular workout routine. It's my bike commute. But I got a job for a consulting firm out of college and was biking to work every day. And our biggest client that I was on tap for was a gas station chain, where we were doing development approvals and zoning approvals and permits for gas stations in Tennessee. And I had a bit of a personal internal conflict about my personal values and what I was doing for work. And this job was a new opportunity for Green Umbrella, our parent organization, to lead the trails arm of the organization. And I feel like I was just in the right place at the right time. And I think, I told them that story when I applied for the job, and I think they felt for me a little bit, like, we got to get this guy in a better spot, so that he's like working on his passion. And it's been a really wonderful fit ever since. It felt like a dream job when I got it, and it still does almost 8 years later.
How long were you working on gas stations?
About 2 or 3 years. Yeah, I think if you
Okay, so
include the co-op.
yeah. So you got a good paying job, a little bit of conflict, or a lot bit of conflict about what you're doing with your personal life, and then how it maybe wasn't completely integrated into your professional life. And then this job hits your radar. Are you working out of Tennessee, or are you working out of Ohio, Northern
Out of
Kentucky area?
Ohio.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I got
Yep.
you. And how old is Green Umbrella?
Green Umbrella's been around for almost 25 years. Next year's 25-year anniversary. But in its current form, it was like 2011, I believe, that what was previously a more grassroots green space preservation oriented organization evolved into an environmental sustainability action oriented organization that has really served as an
Okay.
incubator for a lot of different environmental sustainability initiatives in greater Cincinnati.
And the cycling side of it is just one arm or one
Correct.
department within Green Umbrella,
That's correct.
aptly titled, by the way.
Yes, tri-state trails. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got on board right when we had a grant to do a rebrand and create a name. Previously, it was called the Regional Trails Alliance, which RTA is how it was being referred to. That is also the acronym for most transit authorities around the
Yes, it
country.
is. Regional Transit Authority
That's
fits
right.
nicely.
So we had to
Okay.
change names and found a good one that that fits all of the different jurisdictions that we're working with in the tri-state.
Got it. So, fast forwarding to very recently, you guys are now stepping out um, from underneath the umbrella, so to speak,
Yep.
and will have some measure of independence from Green Umbrella, and that was by design.
Um, yes, in general,
Okay.
there were a number of organizations that have been incubated under Green Umbrella, and then eventually became separate nonprofits. Some of those were, most of them were set up as fiscal agencies or fiscal sponsorships, like Red Bike was
Okay.
originally a fiscal, or Green Umbrella was a fiscal agent for that. And Produce Perks, which is a program that works with EBT recipients to get them access to fresh food. Taking Root, which is a tree planting campaign. Adventure Crew, which was previously the Outdoor Adventure Clubs of Cincinnati. So all of those things kind of had the momentum and needed a place to get feet under them. And Green Umbrella was able to serve as an incubator for them. And Tri-State
I
Trails is
get
a
it.
little different. That
Yeah.
we were originally set up as a payroll staff person within Green Umbrella, specifically on trails, but it was always kind of in the cards that this could be something that made sense in the future. And as we have neared or just reached our 10-year anniversary for Tri-State Trails, for us, with all the momentum we have, it really made a lot of sense to think about a standalone organizations that allows us to customize the goals and the staff and the board for our needs to be able to accelerate active transportation connectivity in greater Cincinnati.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, I didn't appreciate the incubator quality of Green Umbrella. I mean, I can remember 10 years ago seeing stuff in my social media feed about cycling green stuff in general and being excited about it. And then bam, Tri-State Trails is out there.
Yep.
Um, so w- when most people, well, number one, when someone hears Tri-State Trails, they think bike trails
Yep.
for obvious reasons, right? And the average person that's thinking about a bike trail thinks, okay, there's probably some eminent domain and some leasing and then some planning and then somebody builds it and then bingo, you have a bike trail. And I'm guessing a little bit more goes into it than that. Fair
Yeah.
statement.
Yes, yeah, it's a fair statement. And to my knowledge, we haven't had to deal with any eminent domain, which is great because that's often a
Oh, a big sticking point, and it can be
big
pretty
sticking point.
costly because
Yes,
you're,
that's right.
I imagine your most expensive, well, it can become one of your most expensive components is land acquisition. It works a lot better
Yes,
when folks cooperate and see some benefit to having bike paths in their community, and well, there's an educational component to it.
totally.
So I have the benefit of knowing that the life cycle of a bike path is literally years and sometimes
Yes,
decades.
decades. Yes.
Right. So, help the listeners understand, a little bit about, where the seed money comes from, the financing comes from, and then kind of walk through that process of creating a bike trail, because
Yeah.
it may be a little bit of a mystery to the average cyclist. They get the benefit of it, but knowing where they come from maybe news to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for context for your viewers, when we talk about a bike trail or trails in general, we are generally talking about a paved, what people associate as a bike trail, paved, minimum 10, 12 feet wide and welcoming for all users, cyclists, pedestrians, roller skaters, scooters, all of those things, people in mobility
Multimodal.
devices. That's right. And so that's part of the reason we approach the work from this way, is that it checks all the boxes. It hits the widest audience of users. And in Cincinnati, we've been really fortunate that our region has been blessed with the availability of former rail rights of way. So the Little Miami Scenic Trail, also known as the Loveland Bike Trail, is one of the longest and one of the first rail trails in the country. It was considered a pretty innovative idea back in the 80s when there was this new funding available from the federal government that Governor Taft got to build the initial piece between Loveland and Morrow. And I like to say there's three things you need in order to build a trail. You need land. If you don't have land, you can't build a trail. You need money. If you don't have money, you can't build a trail. And you need the public and political support to make it happen. And so with a lot of the rail trails that we've seen in Cincinnati, some of them have been easier than others. Like there was a story that was before my time, but is still referred to, of Terrace Park, a wealthy community just south of Loveland, being very opposed to the trail connecting through, and that being one of the big barriers to connecting the Little Miami Scenic Trail to downtown. Well, I think it was early 2000s that they were finally able to get that approved. And originally folks were saying, we don't want the trail, put up a fence, reluctantly agree to the trail. After the trail gets built, they're saying, can we actually get a gate in our fence? Because this is a nice thing to have in our backyard. But still, we still have some communities that view trails as like this open opportunity for people to visit and, do crime or bring in
It's a
illicit
conduit
activity.
for bad guys.
Exactly. But that is so not the case. Trails are a really great tool to improve public safety because there's more people out and about. That deters criminals from doing bad things because they want to be somewhere where nobody's looking at them, not a busy
Right.
trail that's being used by thousands of people a day. And so for getting trails built, it can often take years, decades, like you said, to acquire the corridor that's needed to put the trail from point A to point B. And in the city of Cincinnati, we've had a lot of big opportunities along the rivers in the floodplain where it's undevelopable land, and
Yeah.
it's easier to acquire land, or these railroads. Like the Wasson Way Trail is another really great example of a rail trail that is repurposing a corridor that was formerly derelict and run down, and now is this vibrant community connector that's stitching together neighborhoods that have been bisected by the highways and providing all kinds of benefits to the community.
You're putting your finger on two interesting resources that we have in northern Kentucky and southwestern Ohio. Lots of floodplain. It's
Yes.
very difficult to develop because a lot of times you have to develop whatever it is 3 feet above the floodplain, and
Yep.
that makes it cost prohibitive to put buildings in that area. And leftover railroads,
Yep.
which are nice and narrow and perfectly sized for putting a
Yes.
trail in.
Yes.
So we are making very good use of what would be might otherwise be undevelopable or unattractive land. So the taxpayers getting a benefit in that regard. The users are most certainly getting a benefit, and it's keeping the overall cost down. In talking about costs, could we talk for a little while or linger for a little while on the Beachmont Levee connector?
Yes.
Okay. Many, many, many years in the making,
Yes.
and very expensive. I'll let you talk about the dollar signs. Not expensive as in overpriced, but it was
Yeah.
an expensive proposition to put it in because we're talking about literally building a bridge that would connect um, at least two bike paths, maybe three
Yep.
if depending on how you add them up. And now it is, and I don't even think it's a novelty issue. I think it is a very attractive feature for runners and cyclists because it connects up both the Loveland Bike Trail and access to downtown Cincinnati, and then ties in both Auto Arm Leader and Lunkin, depending on how you like to ride your bike or do your loops or rollerblade or that sort of thing. Uh, and I can't resist editorializing a little bit. It wasn't the safest area to
Oh
ride your
no,
bike over.
no.
I mean, we can get into some of the safety issues, but we'll
Yeah.
sound like a couple griping commuters. But it removed a lot of literally physically separated that high speed traffic from cyclists. So talk a little bit about the Beachmont connector, how it came together, and maybe put a dollar figure on it, because I don't think people realize how expensive it can be to put infrastructure like that in place.
Yeah, so building on previous example I mentioned, Terrace Park, um, after the trail connected through there, Great Parks was able to uh, pretty easily connect it to what's called Bass Island, one of their park facilities in the Little Miami Golf Center. And what I've heard is for about 20 years, they were waiting for to acquire all of the land that they needed to connect it from Little Miami Golf Center to Beachmont Avenue. Well, that finally happened in 2015, 2016, when they had a property owner pass away who was a holdout, didn't want to sell his land. And as soon as he died, that his family's estate reached out to Great Parks and said, "Do you still want to buy this land?" And they said, "Yes, please." So they got that in motion, got the trail connected down to Beachmont Avenue and 32. And then it was, okay, how do we get it connected to Lincoln? And so one of the options was to go on the east side of the river all the way down to Kellogg Avenue, where there already was a bridge. Additional private property was needed for that, and who knows how long that would have taken. So they made the call, we're going to bite the bullet and build this expensive project that is going to be this massive connection, engineering feat to connect right over to Lincoln Airport. And I've got a picture here I can share with you of the entire bridge. So the trail right here, you can see where it dead
It's
ended
beautiful.
for a long time. And this project had a $9 million price tag because it included this tunnel under the 32 ramp. There's a big retaining wall that they built right here to fit it underneath the levee. And then it loops around and they widened the bridge. And part of the reason that this took so long and cost so much is that the Little Miami River is a state and national scenic river. So that had a lot of hurdles to get through approval from the state and locally. But fortunately, there were piers already in the river for where this bridge was added on. So they were able to pretty easily build the new piers for the widening of the bridge. But for about 30 days, they had this tunnel area closed where they shut down this ramp. They excavated, they put a prefab tunnel in here and loaded it back up with dirt and had it reopened as a driving lane. And this bridge has quite literally been a game changer because now it connects Little Miami Scenic Trail 78 miles all the way to Springfield, Ohio, 326 miles from Cincinnati to Cleveland along the Ohio to Erie Trail. Now is officially connected to the city of Cincinnati, Lunkin Airport, Auto Arm Leader, Ohio River Trails. It is so significant. I cannot underscore. And I'm somebody who personally benefited from this, just like you, Chris, because I
Yes.
live in Mount Washington and I live about a half mile from this bridge.
Yes.
And the prior to the bridge being constructed, I would take the bus over from Lunkin and ride it up to my house, or occasionally I'd call my wife and say, "Will you pick me up at the trailhead?" Or there were plenty of days where I rode it and
Yeah.
it was not pleasant, because you got cars going 45 miles an hour. They're
You know, and
speeding.
you're literally bombing down Beachmont yourself.
Yes,
You could be going 35 miles an hour, and then you would always have that traffic merging from your right
yes,
that may or may not be super focused on a skinny guy on a bike. And
right.
that was a literally a scary proposition.
Yeah,
And one of the things I want to point out about the infrastructure that's in place is that it literally is separating cyclists from
yeah,
45 to sometimes 60 mile an
yeah,
hour
yeah,
traffic in that corridor with what some people refer to as a Jersey barrier. It's one of those
yep,
concrete triangular shaped barriers. And I think this is me editorializing. I think it's bringing out cyclists that might not otherwise even ever think about riding their bike in that area. And that really represented, um, for some cyclists, the proposition of going over the Beachmont levee was
yeah,
just a non-starter for a lot of cyclists because of the inherent danger of the speeds of the vehicles that were um, traveling in both directions. Now, there was a huge shoulder on both sides of the
yep.
road, but wasn't always in great condition. But
And
if
on the
you're not
bridge,
experienced,
there wasn't a shoulder. It's
oh,
like
that's a
that's
good
the
point.
pinch point. That was
Yeah,
the
great
scary
point.
part.
Yeah. And that was the scary part because it was a pinch point. It brought you in, and then you had traffic merging at
Yep,
typically a high rate of speed from your right hand side.
yep,
So it really fundamentally changed infrastructure for commuters and recreational cyclists because they are two different things.
definitely.
Recreational cyclists and commuters, and then you got your racers and your super serious riders. And I want to because I only know I have you for a short period of time. I want to talk a little bit about, and maybe this will be off script for you in the sense that you don't have to speak on behalf of Tri-State Trails, but you can maybe talk as a commuter about what I'm about to ask you. When I think about cycling infrastructure, and I'm editorializing here too, I think about cyclists in three categories that I just laid out: your recreational cyclist, your commuter, and then your kind of fast guys and gals. Okay, do a lot of miles just to train. The guys and gals that are out there doing lots of miles will typically find themselves out on country roads. And if you're an experienced cyclist and you have reasonable motorists around you and everybody adheres to the 3 foot law and nobody's a moron, you end up in a situation where you're in a relatively safe environment. And then the statistics will show that as you get into a more urban environment, the number of crashes goes up, the severity of the crashes go up, and that is a different environment for cyclists to be riding in, and that's where most of your commuters are finding themselves. Okay, then you have your recreational cyclists that may go off trail, and we're going to talk a little bit later about your low stress map. But now you're really encountering motorists. And this is me with a long wind up to what I'm about to ask you. When I think about moving to an urban center, I think about cycling infrastructure and the benefit to having separation of motorists and cyclists. So those Jersey barriers are expensive, but
Yep,
they literally are probably the safest thing to do. Because if you think about like taking that trail down old Pete Rose Way, I forget what they call it now.
yeah, yellow.
And I noticed this that when I'm on it, it's like, yeah, you're in a bike path, but um, motorists they're less likely to adhere to the 3 foot law because it's like you've got your lane and I've got my
Right,
lane, and you just stay over there and I'll stay over here, and they don't oblige that 3 foot law with
right.
the same way that they do if you're out on 32 or Round Bottom Road or Route 8 in northern Kentucky. It's just kind of an interesting phenomenon that
Yeah,
you got a little 18-inch shoulder to ride on Route 8, and you're going to have motorists adhering to the 3 foot law. You get into a concentrated environment where you've created a bike trail, and now you've created this perception of safety because
right.
it's your lane, my lane. I don't have to mess with the 3 foot law anymore. So the wind up here is, what are your thoughts on cycling infrastructure as you find your way into urban environments, and what is maybe the industry practice or the best standards for protecting cyclists in that kind of intermediate area where you're leaving the suburbs, you're not quite downtown, but you have a higher concentration of vehicles? I don't even know if I asked a question there, but I think
Yeah,
I
yeah. I know what you're trying to
concept.
unpack here.
Yeah.
So I think the question that we have to ask ourselves and that we try to at Tri-State Trails is, who is this infrastructure serving? Because the folks who are confident and fearless are already out there. It's you and me. We're riding our bikes for commuting or for road riding to get the miles in. And when I think about the opportunity to change the dynamic of our city, change the way people move for their regular transportation habits, and to improve public health outcomes, I think about designing bike facilities that are welcoming for all users. And there's a dichotomy that you experience when you get into that, because there are some cyclists, those that I would call like the vehicular cyclists who are commuting and are doing longer distance road riding, some of which who believe that bike lanes should not exist, and that bicycles by law, they are a vehicle, and so they should be able to ride in the road, and and cars should respect them, and all of that is factually true, but it comes down to comfort and who feels comfortable in those situations. And what we overwhelmingly hear at our organization is that people don't want to interact with cars. They want to feel safe. They would ride their bike more if there were trails or bikeways that connected them where they need to go. And so that's who we're designing for. We know that there's still going to be people who don't who want to ride fast and want to ride on Kellogg and don't want to ride on the future Ohio River Trail section of the Crown, and that is okay. We want people to have options so that you can find a route that accommodates your comfort level and you can feel safe using it. And I think, overwhelmingly though, in our cities around the country, we're seeing this phenomena of cars driving faster and more recklessly, and
Yes, we
we're
are.
seeing crashes go up. Serious injuries and fatalities are on the rise. Last year was a record year in our region for cyclist fatalities and for almost for pedestrian fatalities. It was like right about tied, just below tied, the previous year, which was a record year in the last 10 years, from the data that we're tracking, at least in Southwest Ohio and Northern Kentucky. And it I really do believe that if we connect where people live to where they need to go in their daily lives, whether it's work or retail or entertainment or parks, that people will make that choice. It's really just about having an option where people feel safe doing it. And so that's why we've really focused our advocacy efforts and um, coalition building efforts for building a network around Cincinnati that we call the Crown, the Cincinnati Riding and Walking Network, a 34-mile trail loop that will link up 4 major trails in development: the Little Miami Scenic Trail, the Wasson Way Trail, the Ohio River Trail, and the Mill Creek Greenway Trail. And when that is done, which, by the way, 24 miles of that are in motion to be connected. But when it's fully done, we will be within a mile of 54 different communities. Some of those are Cincinnati neighborhoods, some of those are neighboring jurisdictions. And it will fundamentally change the landscape for how people can get around the city. And it will be a catalyst for future investment in active transportation beyond just the loop.
Yeah, yeah, and that, I'll confess, I fall into that camp of cyclists that would prefer not to have, for example, a bike lane along Pete Rose Way.
Mhm.
But then you have to think in terms of, okay, that might be my preference, and that may fit my um, not my view of the world, but my, the environment that I would prefer the environment to look like that. But I'm just one cyclist and one user
Yep.
of the roadways. And you are not going to get folks out there in those areas if they're uncomfortable.
Right.
And
Especially
that's,
kids, senior
oh,
citizens,
yeah,
families,
right,
and more people are moving to the urban cores. They want to live in walkable, bikeable environments. And this is about remaining economically competitive as a region.
right,
Because if Cincinnati doesn't invest in this, Columbus is, Indianapolis already did,
right.
Louisville and Lexington are. I mean, this is about providing an amenity for a wide audience of people.
And I would go beyond the word amenity, and I'd describe it as critical infrastructure.
Totally.
Because if you don't have the infrastructure, you're not going to attract the families. And this isn't like trying to talk somebody into dusting off their bike in their garage and going out for
Yeah.
a 5 mile ride with a family member. What we're talking about is attracting young professionals in particular, I would imagine, but old professionals like me that don't mind commuting. But the point is, this is in the marketplace, not the marketplace of ideas, the
Yeah.
literal marketplace for young professionals and future Cincinnatians and Northern Kentuckians. This is something that folks place a premium on when they're
Yeah.
selecting a place to live. And,
Absolutely.
and, and could you speak to, because I don't know, I don't have any sense of it, how Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, I don't want to say stack up, but
Yeah.
where the infrastructure that we're describing, the infrastructure that's going to encourage commuters. That's if you're a lifestyle cyclist, vehicular cyclist, this is going to be a good place for you to raise a family and pursue an occupation. Who's our peer group and how do we fit?
Yeah. So for um, Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, I think Cincinnati rates somewhere in like the 30s of the League of American Bicyclists bike friendly cities ranking. That has gone up and down a couple times over the
Yeah, it has.
years. I don't think any of the cities in Northern Kentucky are even on that top 50. Um, and I would say in general, Cincinnati is on the right track, but still has some catching up to do compared to the cities that are really excelling. And when I think
Yeah,
about those cities, Indianapolis right down the street has one of the best urban trail networks in the country with the Indianapolis Cultural Trail. And it's only like an 8 mile network in their downtown, but it is world class. Dayton, right up the street, they have the largest connected paved trail network in the country. That's their claim to fame. It's over 350 miles of paved trails and bike lanes. Then you've got cities like Chicago and Minneapolis and Portland, which are really excelling,
yeah.
and some
Is
cities in
Portland really the
Colorado.
gold standard? Is that the one everybody uses as a comparison
Portland
point?
is up at
Yeah,
the top for sure. I think like Davis, Colorado is one of the top ones, and it's like a college town. Boulder,
yeah.
um, some
I
of
have a
those
nephew out
cities.
there. He's
Yeah,
always bragging on the bike trails.
yeah. I haven't been there, but I've had the chance through this job to go to a lot of Midwestern peer cities, and it's so within reach for Cincinnati in particular. I think Northern Kentucky still has some catching up to do, but the plans that we have in motion with the Crown and with the city's recent investments that they're making into road calming and on-road protected on-road bike infrastructure is going to quickly excel our ranking for as a city. And then Northern Kentucky has the bones for it with pieces of the Riverfront Commons Trail that are built and the Licking River Greenway Trail. It's really about creating a network that links those up so that
Yeah,
it forms a system that people can use to get from point A to point B. And it's not just drive your car to the trailhead and walk or
right,
ride a bike,
right. And I'm going to bring you back because I know I'm pressed for time. I do want to
Yeah.
bring you back to talk about traffic calming, how regions get ranked, because I think that's something that there are very subtle safety measures that can be taken that are appreciated when you are experiencing them, but
Yep.
they're kind of, I don't want to call them ethereal, but they're concepts that that you can geek out on if you're an engineer, but to translate to the vehicular cyclist or the recreational cyclist, that's it's a difficult concept to
Yeah.
you know it when you see it.
Yes, everyday people like that, like you said, the idea of traffic calming and protected bike lanes and pedestrian bump outs and speed humps and speed bumps and speed cushions, all these different tools that are in the toolbox. They may sound like jargon to somebody who doesn't work and live in this space, but at the end of the day, what all these tools are aiming to accomplish is streets that are safe and comfortable for people to walk, to shop at businesses, to ride bikes, and overwhelmingly really for the first time in 60 years, cities are having this revitalization where more people want to live close to things that they do in their everyday life. And I think the pandemic really shook up the status quo for
A lot of
what people,
rethinking was done over a 2 year period of time.
including, so not only just the way that our cities are designed, but the way that people commute, telecommuting, and
Yes,
and the way that businesses have embraced that has changed the way that our road networks are being utilized. And it's
very
less
good point.
vehicle miles traveled, but more speeding and crashes. And it's because our thoroughfares are these, think about pretty much every neighborhood in Cincinnati has
Yeah,
at least one 4-lane road, a
yeah.
big thoroughfare that people drive fast on because it's it's
And
it's as wide as a tarmac. People are going to drive like a tarmac, like they're an airplane getting ready to take off.
that's right.
Um,
And speed kills. I mean, that's
yep,
not a euphemism. That's a reality.
yep,
So I want to bring you back to talk about those tools in your
yeah,
toolbox. Before I let you go, because I know we're coming up
yeah,
on a hard break, uh, direct folks to your website
yes.
and talk about some of the resources that are available on that website. If you don't, I will.
Yes, yes. So if you go to tristatetrails.org, you can learn all about the work that we're doing. One of our most popular web pages is our Find a Trail tool. So you can find all of the existing paved trails, bike lanes, mountain biking trails, some hiking trails even in Greater Cincinnati on that map. We also have a special map that is specifically for bike commuting, and that is our low stress bike map, which you mentioned earlier. This is a map that we curated with like 50 avid cyclists who have been commuting on a regular basis for years, and we asked them, where are your favorite places to ride? What are the most comfortable roads that you would tell a beginner to use instead of riding on the main drag? And we put all those into a map for the urban core, and we distribute over 10,000 copies of it every year. So it's a really great entry point for people to make a plan for their first bike commute or joyride to
Enjoy a ride.
get around.
There's something to enjoying riding a bike. Sometimes we
That's right.
forget that.
That's right.
Okay, and you didn't leave it out, but I would add great advocacy resources on the website. The blog is updated with great frequency, so there's a lot of articles to review, and they're well curated is by topic. So I would describe it as an excellent one-stop resource from an advocacy perspective, from a cycling availability perspective, and what the future holds
Yep.
perspective. So we thank you for that. Thank you for you and your staff and all the time they put into these endeavors.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Chris. It's like I said before, I feel so fortunate to have a job like this, and my whole team does. I mean, we're all giddy every day for how positive of an impact we're having on the community, and it's surreal sometimes to be able to do this for a day job.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds corny, but sometimes you gotta pinch yourself when you get to do something you
Yeah,
love for a living.
that's right. That's right.
All right, with that, I'll let you go, and we'll have a hard break.